The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the marble halls of the Ashford corporate tower on that bright spring morning when a single, trembling cry broke the building's usual rhythm. That cry, soft, frightened, desperate, came from a baby who seemed far too young to understand the weight of the world already pressing down on him. And yet, within moments, something extraordinary happened. A man whose hands once shaped empires suddenly froze mid-stride, his breath catching as the tiny child locked eyes with him. Everyone watched in utter disbelief as the baby, who never let a stranger close, reached out his little arms, directly toward the millionaire. If you believe in kindness, hope, and second chances, take a moment now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your support helps spread stories that remind the world what compassion truly looks like. Her name was Marissa Coltrane, a quiet woman who mopped floors and emptied wastebaskets long before sunrise. She carried herself with a tired dignity, her deep brown eyes showing the marks of sleepless nights spent comforting her infant son, Cairo. Everyone in the building knew Marissa worked harder than most, but the story behind that effort remained tucked away like a wound she didn't dare show. She had lost her husband in a sudden construction accident before Cairo was even born, leaving her with nothing but medical bills, a tiny apartment with peeling paint, and a child who had come into the world already grieving a father he'd never meet. Cairo didn't speak yet, but something in his silence felt heavy. He avoided strangers, turned his face away whenever someone tried to coo at him, and buried himself in the safety of Marissa's shoulder whenever anyone walked too close. It wasn't shyness, it was fear. Marissa had learned that fear had a way of settling into children like him, children born into stress so strong it seeped into the womb. Still, she loved him with all she had, whispering prayers over him as she carried him in a sling while scrubbing floors on her second shift. On that particular morning, she was late, something that had never happened before. The train stalled, the stroller wheel jammed, and Cairo was unusually fussy, clutching at her shirt like he sensed the pressure beating against her chest. When she rushed into the lobby, everyone turned. Not in judgment, in quiet sympathy. They all liked Marissa, but few really knew her, and even fewer understood the depth of her struggle. At that precise moment, Grant Bishop, millionaire founder of Bishop Innovations, stepped into the lobby. Grant was known for his cold focus, razor-sharp, relentless, unshakable. He rarely smiled outside board meetings, and even then only when numbers aligned perfectly. He didn't believe in unnecessary interactions. He believed in efficiency, precision, and discipline. Which is why what happened next would later be whispered about for weeks throughout the office. The elevator doors opened, Grant stepped forward with his usual unbreakable stride, and Cairo's tiny cry rang through the space like a plea. Grant stopped mid-step, something he never did. His eyes turned, almost involuntarily, toward the source. The baby's wide, tear-glimmering eyes lifted from Marissa's shoulder, and locked onto Grant. The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Cairo had never reached for anyone but his mother. Never. Yet his small hand slowly extended toward Grant, fingers trembling like he recognized something in the man others couldn't see. Grant blinked, stunned. "Is he reaching for me?" he murmured under his breath, the barest crack in his usually unshakable voice. Even Marissa froze, not understanding what was happening. But Cairo leaned forward again, making a soft, yearning sound. Grant stepped closer, uncertain and unsteady for perhaps the first time in his adult life, and when he gently touched the baby's hand, Cairo instantly stilled. Calm, quiet, comforted, whispers erupted around them. No one had ever seen Grant look at anyone the way he looked at Cairo in that moment, like something fragile had suddenly reminded him of everything he'd forgotten to feel. Marissa apologized breathlessly, trying to step back, but Grant surprised her by lifting a hand. "It's okay," he said, his voice low, something unspoken lingering between the words. "He's remarkable." From that moment on, something began to shift. Over the next few weeks, Grant found reasons, small, disguised excuses, to pass through the lobby earlier than usual, timing his arrivals with Marissa's shift. He brought coffee for the cleaning staff, something he'd never done before. He left small toys for Cairo at the reception desk, always insisting they were extra samples from a product meeting. And Cairo, who still refused to be near anyone else, always leaned forward when Grant appeared, calm and trusting in a way no one could explain. Marissa watched these moments unfold with a mix of gratitude and confusion. She didn't know much about Grant except what the newspapers said, that he had once been married, that he'd lost a daughter to a rare illness at only 2 years old, and that after her passing, he buried himself entirely in his work, shutting out the world piece by piece until nothing remained except numbers and deadlines. Maybe that was why Cairo had reached for him. Maybe broken souls could recognize one another, even without words. One afternoon, Marissa was cleaning the conference level when she felt lightheaded. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and she had to steady herself against the wall. She tried to push through the dizziness. She couldn't afford missing hours, but her body trembled uncontrollably. She sank onto a bench, holding Cairo close as he began to fuss. Minutes later, Grant stepped off the elevator and froze when he saw her slumped forward, breathing shallowly. Without hesitation, he rushed toward her. "Marissa, you don't look well. When was the last time you ate?" he asked, genuine fear sharpening his voice. She shook her head weakly. "I'm fine, just tired. I can't miss work." Grant didn't accept that answer. He escorted her to a small wellness room, brought her water, and even held Cairo, something no one else at the office dared attempt. But Cairo rested peacefully in his arms, almost protective of the man holding him. "You shouldn't be doing all this alone," Grant said quietly, watching the baby sleep. "You're carrying too much." Marissa looked down, her voice tightening. "I don't have a choice." That night changed everything. Grant began arranging things in the background, quietly, respectfully, without drawing attention. He improved benefits for all cleaning staff, added daycare options to the building, and created a hardship support fund. No one knew the full story, only that their cold, unreachable CEO suddenly became human again, but Cairo knew. He always reached for Grant, laughed for Grant, settled peacefully in Grant's presence as though the man's heartbeat carried a familiar rhythm. Months passed, and Grant found himself visiting the daycare more often, sharing lunches with Marissa in the break lounge, learning about her dreams, and slowly revealing parts of himself he'd locked away for years. Meanwhile, the baby who once clung only to his mother now split his affection, Marissa on one side, Grant on the other, as though he instinctively understood that both hearts needed healing. Then came the day the building lost power during a severe storm. Thunder shook the windows, rain hammered the roof, and the emergency lights flickered uncertainly. The daycare children cried, frightened by the darkness. Marissa rushed through hallways, calling out for Cairo, but the lights were too dim, her nerves too frayed. Panic clawed at her chest. She had never felt so helpless, but when she burst through the final hallway door, she saw Grant kneeling on the floor, holding Cairo close while softly humming a gentle, broken melody he once sang to his daughter. Cairo lay peacefully against his chest, unaffected by the storm outside. Tears blurred Marissa's vision. "How does he trust you so much?" she whispered, kneeling beside them. Grant didn't answer immediately. He stared at the tiny boy in his arms, something like redemption flickering behind his eyes. "Maybe, because he saved me first," he finally said, voice thick with emotion. After that day, Grant didn't hide how much he cared. He invited Marissa and Cairo to weekend picnics, helped fix things in her apartment, and slowly became the constant presence Marissa never expected in her life. What began as an extraordinary connection between a frightened baby and a grieving man blossomed into something that felt like family. A new start, built from broken pieces pieced together with tenderness. By the time Cairo learned to walk, his first steps were taken with one hand in Marissa's, and the other in Grant's, and in that simple, extraordinary moment, Marissa finally understood. Some people come into our lives not by accident, but by fate. And sometimes, the smallest hands reach out first, guiding us toward the second chances we didn't even know we needed.